On the morning, Evelyn Hart turned 21. Her guardian gave her £12, a rusted key, and one order: live alone at Hollowmere Hall until the demolition men arrived. He called it a final act of charity. Evelyn knew it was a quiet way of burying her while she was still alive. But during her first night inside the condemned manor, a servant bell began ringing from a nursery sealed for 18 years. Behind the door, she found a child's height marked on the wall beside her own name, and beneath it, a warning written in her dead mother's hand: if Elias learns you open this room, he will burn the house with you inside. Then Evelyn smelled smoke beneath the floor. The smoke did not rise in a cloud. It came in a thin gray ribbon through the seam between two boards, so slight that another person might have mistaken it for dust disturbed by her skirts. Evelyn dropped to her knees. The nursery floor was cold under her palm, except for one narrow strip near the hearth, where the wood held a faint, unnatural warmth. The servant bell rang again above her head. One clear note. A pause. Two more. Not the wild clamor of a loose wire in the wind, but a deliberate pattern. Evelyn looked toward the nursery door. She had forced it open less than 10 minutes earlier, breaking the brittle wax that sealed the lock and lifting an iron latch that had been bolted from the corridor side. Beyond it, the room had waited under white sheets and years of dust. A small bed stood beneath the window. A cradle sat near the fireplace. Faded blue birds flew across the wallpaper, their wings half-eaten by damp. And on the wall beside the wardrobe, lines of pencil climbed from the skirting board to the height of a grown child. Beside, one mark, written in a hand she knew from the only 3 letters she possessed, were the words Evelyn. Age 3. Her mother had died when Evelyn was 6 months old. That was the first lie the room had exposed. The warning below the name was the second. Now smoke threaded through the floor. Evelyn took the brass candlestick from the washstand and struck its base against the warm board. Once. Twice. On the third blow, the edge cracked. A breath of hotter air pushed through, carrying the sharp smell of lamp oil. Someone had lit a fire below the nursery. She seized the wool cover from the child's bed, plunged it into a basin of rainwater, and pressed the dripping cloth over the widening seam. The smoke thickened around her fingers. From the corridor came the groan of timber, and then a muted thud from somewhere inside the wall. The bell rang once more. 1 note. Then 2. Evelyn had no idea what it meant, but she understood the urgency. She dragged the cradle away from the hearth. Beneath one runner lay a small iron ring set flush into the boards. She pulled. A square panel lifted, revealing a narrow shaft and an old rope ladder descending into darkness. Warm smoke breathed up from below. Evelyn hesitated only long enough to wrap her skirt close around her legs. Then she lowered herself into the shaft. The panel fell shut above her, leaving her in blackness with the rusted key clenched between her teeth and the bell sounding faintly through the walls. She climbed down 12 rungs before her boots touched stone. A passage ran beneath the nursery, scarcely wide enough for her shoulders. At its far end, orange light flickered. Evelyn moved toward it. One hand against the wall, the passage opened into a low service chamber where shelves had once held coal and kindling. A pile of rags burned beside the timber supports. The flames were small but carefully placed, fed with oil, and tucked where they would climb into the old floor above. This was no accident. She stamped at the nearest flame with her wet hem, then found a sand bucket in the corner and emptied it over the rest. When the last glow darkened, she heard footsteps retreating through the passage beyond the coal room. "Stop," she called. The footsteps quickened. Evelyn followed. But the passage divided. One branch led toward the kitchens. The other ended at a door standing open to the night. Rain blew through it. Outside, a shadow crossed the ruined kitchen garden and vanished behind the yew hedge. By the time Evelyn reached the doorway, whoever had entered Hollowmere was gone. She stood in the rain with smoke in her hair and the taste of iron in her mouth. Looking down the empty slope toward the village lights, her guardian had told her the manor was abandoned. He had told her no one had lived there in 18 years. Yet someone knew the hidden passage. Someone had known she opened the nursery. And someone had tried to burn the evidence before she could understand it. 14 hours earlier, Evelyn had still lived in Elias Harrow's London house, where every clock chimed at the same moment and every door closed softly because the servants feared disturbing him. She had awakened on her birthday before dawn, packed her belongings into one carpet bag, and waited for the conversation she had known was coming. Elias had never been cruel in a way that left bruises. His cruelty was cleaner. He controlled the rooms she could enter, the letters she could receive, the books she was allowed to read, and the money she was told did not exist. He was her mother's cousin, or so he said, and had raised her since infancy after fever took both parents. He called that guardianship a sacrifice. He mentioned its cost whenever Evelyn asked for anything beyond food. Plain dresses, and 2 hours of instruction each morning. On the day she reached legal age, he summoned her to his study. A solicitor named Mr. Pike sat at the desk with papers aligned in a precise stack. Elias stood by the window in a dark morning coat, broad in the shoulders, silver beginning at his temples. "Your maintenance ends today," he said. "The arrangement made on your behalf covered your minority only." Evelyn looked at Mr. Pike. What arrangement? The solicitor's eyes moved to Elias before returning to the paper. "A private family provision, from whom that is not relevant," Elias said. He placed the rusted key on the desk. "Hollowmere Hall belongs to a distant branch of your mother's family. It has been empty for years and is scheduled for demolition in 14 days. Until then, the property requires an occupant to prevent trespass. You will go there as caretaker, unpaid, housed," Elias corrected, "and provided with £12 for food and travel, more than many young women receive when they leave a guardian's care." Evelyn touched the key. It was long, heavy, and stained brown with age. "What happens after the demolition? You find work." "Where?" Elias's mouth tightened. "You have always been capable of making yourself useful." There it was. Not a plan. Not an introduction. Not even a reference. He wanted her gone from London before she could ask what had become of the money used for her maintenance. "Mr. Pike slid a paper toward her. "Sign here to acknowledge that you hold no financial or hereditary claim upon Hollowmere Hall or any contents found within it." Evelyn read the sentence twice. Elias looked away as though bored. But his right thumb pressed hard into the edge of his glove. It was the first sign of strain she had seen. "Why must I sign if the house belongs to someone else?" she asked. "Mr. Pike cleared his throat. "To simplify disposal. Then disposal can remain complicated." She folded the paper and pushed it back unsigned. Elias's face did not change, but silence hardened around him. "You will reconsider," he said. 14 days in that place will improve your judgment." Evelyn took the key and the £12. She did not thank him. By noon she was on the northbound coach. By evening, the following day, after a rail journey, a hired cart, and the last 3 miles on foot because the driver refused to take his horse beyond the flooded bridge, she saw Hollowmere for the first time. The manor stood above a dark lake in a fold of hills. Its central block, built of gray stone, and its 2 wings stretching toward stands of bare beach. One chimney leaned. Ivy swallowed the eastern wall. Half the windows were boarded, and the roof above the north wing had sagged like a tired shoulder. A painted notice had been nailed to the gate, condemned. Demolition authorized. Entry at own risk. Beneath it, in smaller letters, was the name Harrow Development and Rail. Evelyn stared at the name until rain blurred the ink. Elias was not merely disposing of a distant family ruin. His company intended to acquire the land beneath it. A second notice gave the demolition date. 14 days. The key opened the front door. Inside, Hollowmere smelled of wet plaster, soot, miche, and long-closed rooms. The entrance hall rose 2 stories beneath a cracked glass dome. Portraits had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles in the dust. The floor tiles formed a black and white compass, though several were missing from the northern point. Evelyn chose a small sitting room beside the old housekeeper's pantry because its chimney drew and the ceiling showed no fresh damp. She found a serviceable blanket, a chipped basin, 3 candles, and a box of matches sealed in wax. She ate bread and cold meat from her bag. Then began the first task as Mrs. Weecaw. Belle, the cook in Elias's house, had once taught her, make 1 safe room before darkness. She swept the hearth, checked the flue, blocked the broken lower pane with folded sacking, and lit a fire no larger than her 2 hands. It was near midnight when the servant bell rang. The bellboard hung in the corridor outside the pantry. A row of brass bells labeled for rooms throughout the manor. Most wires had been cut. 1 label, blackened with age. Read North Nursery. The bell moved, though the wire beneath it looked slack. 1 note. A. Pause. 2 more. Evelyn took a candle and followed the passage north. The sealed nursery waited at the end, its lock clogged with wax and the date 1854 scratched into the frame. She should have returned to the safe room. She should have waited for daylight. Instead, she thought of the unsigned declaration on Mr. Pike's desk and Elias's thumb pressed into his glove. She used a hairpin, a kitchen knife, and finally the rusted key. It did not turn the lock, but its narrow end broke the wax. Behind the wax, she found no keyhole at all, only a small brass plate. When she pressed it, the latch released. That was how she entered the room, found her name, read her mother's warning, and smelled the fire below. Now, after extinguishing the flames in the passage, Evelyn returned to the nursery before dawn. The smoke had thinned. She relit the candle and examined everything without touching more than necessary. The warning had been written in pencil directly on the plaster and covered years later by a strip of wallpaper. Damp had loosened the paper, exposing the words. The handwriting matched her mother's letters, narrow, upright, with the tail of every Y curving left. Above it were 7 height marks. Evelyn at 3, Evelyn at 4, Evelyn at 5. The last line was dated November 1851, 6 months before Elias claimed Evelyn had ever visited Hollowmere. Her heart beat slowly, heavily. If the markings were true, she had lived here through early childhood. Why did she remember none of it? She opened the wardrobe. Children's clothes hung inside, beneath linen covers. Too small for her now. In a drawer lay wooden blocks carved with letters. A red ribbon faded to rust, and a silver-backed brush engraved E. H. The initials might have been hers. On the underside of the drawer, someone had written a sequence of numbers, 1 to 2. San da E. R dao R. Yi dao san. The bell pattern. Evelyn copied the numbers into the back of a prayer book. The cradle appeared empty, but one side rail bore a carving of a lantern surrounded by reeds. The same symbol was stamped inside the rusted key. When daylight came, she searched the manor's outer doors. The service door from the passage had been forced recently. Fresh mud marked the stones outside, and a boot heel had crushed a stem of winter rosemary. Near the yew hedge, she found a torn strip of dark blue wool caught on a thorn. Elias's household footman wore dark blue livery. That did not prove he had sent someone. but it narrowed the world. At 8, a cart came up the drive. A young man jumped down carrying a surveyor's case. He introduced himself as Jonas Reed, assistant to the county building inspector. He was lean, perhaps 26, with wind-reddened cheeks and a scar along one knuckle. I was told the caretaker had arrived. He said, "I am to make a final structural record before demolition." Evelyn did not open the gate fully. "Who told you, mister?" Harrow's office. "Did Mr. Harrow's office also tell you someone attempted to set fire beneath the nursery?" Jonas's expression changed too quickly, then settled. "No." "Do you know the service passages? I know old houses often have them." "That was not my question." He looked past her toward the manor. "Miss Hart, the roof is unsafe. The east chimney may fall, and the retaining wall above the lake has failed in 2 places. Whatever happened last night, you should not remain here. Yet your employer sent me." "Mr. Harrow is not my employer. The county engaged my master. I assist him." Evelyn showed him the demolition notice with Harrow Development and Rail printed beneath it. "Then perhaps the county and my guardian have become difficult to distinguish." Jonas read the notice and frowned. That name was not on the authorization when I saw it. For the first time, Evelyn was uncertain whether his surprise was genuine. She let him enter only after taking his full name, his lodging in Graymere Village, and the brass identification disc from his case as security. Jonas laughed once, softly. "You have been here 1 night and already trust no one. I trusted someone for 20 years. I am correcting the imbalance." He spent the morning measuring cracks, sketching the roof line, and tapping beams with a small hammer. Evelyn followed him. He found the nursery fire chamber and knelt beside the scorched supports. "This was deliberate," he said. "The oil was poured in 3 places. Can you identify the man who did it? No. Can you delay demolition? Not on suspicion alone. But if the structure contains occupied rooms or protected records, the order can be reviewed. What records? Legal documents, institutional archives, burial registers, anything that changes the property's status." Evelyn thought of the markings on the nursery wall. "And if the house itself belongs to someone other than the company named on the gate, then demolition without title would be criminal." He met her eyes. "Do you believe it belongs to you?" "I believe my guardian wanted me to sign a statement saying it did not." Jonas stopped tapping the beam. "That is not the same thing." "No," Evelyn said. "It is more interesting." At noon, a woman from the village arrived with a basket of coal and a message. She was Mrs. Brindley, the postmistress, short and square, with a face that suggested she had no patience for foolishness. "The vicar heard someone was in residence," she said. "He sent coal. I came because the vicar believes every stranger is honest until corrected." She looked at Jonas. "And you are already here, which saves time." Jonas Seahead. "Good morning, Mrs. Brindley." It ceased being morning when I saw Harrow's notice on the gate. She turned to Evelyn. "Your guardian owns half the debts in Graymere and wants the other half. He has been buying land for the rail spur. Hollowmere sits where his survey bends." "Did anyone live here 18 years ago?" Evelyn asked. Mrs. Brindle's eyes sharpened. "Why? Because I may have?" The woman studied her face, then the silver locket at her throat. "Where did you get that?" Evelyn touched it. "It belonged to my mother." Mrs. Brindle set down the coal basket. "Come to the post office before dark. Bring the locket. Do not bring him." She pointed at Jonas and left without another word. Jonas watched the cart disappear. "She likes me more than that sounded. I will judge by the funeral notice." Graymere lay 2 miles around the lake. A village of stone cottages, a church, a blacksmith, and one narrow street that climbed toward the moor. At the post office, Mrs. Brindle locked the front door, pulled the curtains, and took Evelyn into a back room lined with pigeonholes. From a cupboard, she removed a parcel wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay 17 letters, all addressed to Hollowmere Hall under different women's names. None had been delivered. They were held after the house closed. "Mrs." Brindle said, "My mother kept them because Lydia Hart asked her to keep anything bearing the lantern mark." She turned Evelyn's locket over. On the back, nearly worn smooth, was the same lantern and reeds carved on the nursery cradle. "Your mother lived at Hollowmere. She was not merely family. She ran it. Ran what? A refuge. Though they never used that word in public. Women came here when husbands took their wages, when fathers arranged violent marriages, when employers dismissed them with nowhere to sleep. Hollowmere gave them work, lessons, and a room until they could stand alone." Evelyn looked at the letters. "Why was it closed, Mrs.?" Brindle's mouth tightened. "A fire in the east wing. Your mother disappeared the same week. Harrow said she died of fever in London and took you into his care. Did you believe him? No. But belief is not evidence. And Elias Harrow collected evidence the way other men collect rent. One letter bore the name Ruth Vale. The paper was newer than the rest, posted only 3 weeks earlier. Evelyn opened it. The message contained 5 words. "The bell remembers every room." No address. No explanation. "Who is Ruth Vale?" she asked. "Mrs." Brindle shook her head. "A maid at Hollowmere." "Perhaps. My mother mentioned a Ruth. She would be nearly 70 now." Evelyn returned to the manor before sunset, with the letters hidden beneath her dress. Eunice had gone, leaving a note that he would return the next morning to inspect the retaining wall. On the nursery floor, Evelyn arranged the 17 envelopes in order of date. Several contained thanks to Lydia Hart. One described money placed into a common trust. Another referred to the lantern rooms and the female settlement. A third begged Lydia not to let Elias take control of the accounts. The last complete letter, dated 3 days before the East Wing fire, said, "The original transfer has been witnessed. The bellmaker will conceal the reference where no Harrow man will look. Keep Evelyn's name from the register until she is safe." Evelyn read the line twice. Then the servant bell rang. 1 note. 2 notes. She looked at the numbers under the nursery drawer, 1 to 2. The first pair. She went to the bellboard. The north nursery bell quivered. Beneath it, a narrow brass pointer had moved toward the label "Library." Evelyn followed the corridor to the library, where shelves stood empty except for mold and mouse nests. The fireplace was cold. A section of wall beside it carried a faint scrape at floor level. She pressed. A panel opened inward. Behind it was a passage no wider than a wardrobe, and inside the passage stood an old woman holding a kitchen knife. Her hair was white, her back bent, but her eyes were bright and furious. "You took your time," she said. Evelyn did not move. "Ruth Vale, and you are Lydia's girl. Though Harrow dressed you in his silence so long, you nearly forgot your own face." Ruth lowered the knife. She lived not inside the walls, as Evelyn first imagined, but in a gardener's cottage beyond the western grove. For 18 years, she had entered Hollowmere through the service passages to keep the nursery dry. Oil, certain locks, and prevent Harrow's men from finding what remained. She had rung the bell after seeing light in the caretaker's room. She had also seen the footman who set the fire. Blue coat, missing the top button, walks with his right foot turned outward. She said, "Name is Caleb Sorn. Harrow uses him for things no clerk should record. Why did you not stop him? I am 68 and carry a bread knife." I rang the bell and opened the cradle hatch. You did the rest. Ruth showed Evelyn the hidden network. Passages linked the nursery, library, kitchen, and an old classroom beneath the west stairs. The lantern rooms had sheltered women under assumed names. Each resident learned bookkeeping, sewing, nursing, or trade skills, then left with a small grant from the trust. Lydia Hart had become matron after Evelyn's grandmother died. Elias Harrow had served as accountant. He began lending trust money to his own companies. Ruth said, "Your mother discovered it. She prepared to remove him. Then the east wing burned. Did he kill her? I do not know. I saw her alive after the fire, carrying you toward the lake road. I saw Harrow's carriage follow. I never saw her again." Evelyn's hands went cold. "And my father, Samuel Hart, was the trust's legal clerk. A gentle man when courage cost nothing. When it cost everything." He hesitated. Ruth reached into her coat and produced a torn ledger page. It bore Samuel's signature beneath a false statement, declaring the female settlement dissolved. He signed this under pressure. Later, he tried to undo it. Harrow told the world both your parents died. Samuel lived another 4 years under another name. Gathering records. Where are those records? That is what Harrow has searched for. The next morning, Elias arrived in a closed carriage. He entered Hollowmere without knocking, accompanied by Mr. Pike, Caleb Sorn, and 2 laborers. Evelyn met them in the entrance hall, with Ruth hidden behind the library panel and Jonas standing near the staircase, having arrived minutes earlier. Elias looked around at the swept tiles, lit fire, and opened shutters. "You have mistaken temporary occupancy for ownership," he said, "and you have mistaken me for the child who left this house with you." Evelyn replied. A flicker crossed his face. "You have been listening to village inventions. Did I live here at age 5? No. Then why is my name marked in the nursery in my mother's hand, Mr. Pike looked at Elias. Caleb shifted his right foot outward. The missing top button on his blue coat left a dark thread at the collar. Evelyn saw Ruth had described him exactly. Elias removed his gloves. Old houses attract fraud. A name can be written at any time. The room was sealed. By trespassers? Perhaps. And the fire beneath it. A condemned structure is full of hazards. Jonas stepped forward. Lamp oil does not pour itself into 3 separate piles of cloth. Elias gave him a long look. "Your master will hear that you have exceeded your role." "My master died last month," Jonas said. "The county retained me to complete his inspections. You knew that when your office altered the notice." "Mr. Pike whispered something to Elias. Elias ignored him and placed a new document on the hall table. "The demolition has been advanced. 7 days. Sign the disclaimer. Accept £50. And leave with dignity." "Why, 50 now when 12 was enough yesterday? Because I am tired of this performance." "No," Evelyn said. "Because the room remembers me." Elias's calm broke at last. His hand struck the table. Dust jumped. "This place remembers nothing. Stone has no rights. Dead women have no rights. And you have no proof." The words rang through the hall. From behind the library wall came the faint click of Ruth shifting her weight. Elias heard it. His eyes moved toward the panel. Evelyn stepped between him and the library. "Then you have nothing to fear from 7 days." Elias smiled without warmth. "Every hour you remain here will cost you more than you understand." He left the document unsigned. Before the carriage reached the gate, Caleb looked back at the north wing. The threat had changed. Elias no longer wanted Evelyn merely removed. He wanted the house searched before it fell. The carriage had scarcely disappeared when a stone struck the nursery window. It did not break the glass, but a folded note tied around it fell onto the floor. "Leave before the next fire" is not small. Ruth wanted to burn the message. Evelyn smoothed it instead and placed it beside the scorched cloth from the coal chamber. "Threats are records," she said, "only if someone with authority agrees to read them." Ruth answered, "Then we will collect enough that authority becomes embarrassed not to." That afternoon, Evelyn walked through Graymere carrying the unsigned disclaimer, the altered demolition notice, the threatening note, and the strip of blue livery. She visited the blacksmith, the vicar, the innkeeper, the cooper, and the quarry office. She did not ask anyone to believe a dramatic story. She asked small questions. Had Caleb Sorn been seen in the village the night before her arrival? Who printed the second demolition notice? When had Harrow Development purchased options on the lakeside fields? Why did the county authorization name a different contractor? Small questions produced small answers. The blacksmith had shod Caleb's horse at sunset. The printer remembered Harrow's clerk ordering new notices after the county seal was already applied. The innkeeper had heard 2 railway agents discussing an auction before Evelyn had reached legal age. The quarry bookkeeper admitted that Elias promised compensation once the female claim was removed. By evening, Evelyn possessed no single proof strong enough to stop him. But she had a chain of facts no honest official could dismiss without effort. She also had enemies who now knew she was asking. A dead rat appeared on the kitchen step the next morning with the lantern symbol cut into the wood beneath it. Someone poisoned the small well near the stable with paraffin. 2 roof braces Jonas had marked as sound were loosened during the night. Hollowmere was not simply being left to decay. It was being helped toward collapse. Evelyn responded as Mrs. Pell had taught her to respond to every household emergency, identify what could kill someone first, what could wait until morning, and what only looked frightening. The poisoned well was sealed. The braces were reset with iron pins borrowed from Abel Cross. The dead rat was wrapped and stored as evidence rather than allowed to become a message. She slept in the nursery with the service hatch open and a poker beside the bed. Ruth slept behind the library panel, where no visitor would think to look. Jonas began staying until midnight. Then, walking back to the village with a lantern and a heavy wrench. On the second evening, Evelyn found him repairing a cracked rain barrel behind the kitchen. "The inspection does not require that," she said. "No. The county will not pay you for it." "No? Then why are you doing it?" Jonas fitted a new iron band around the barrel before answering. "Because rain should not be wasted in a house with a poisoned well." "That is a practical answer. It is the only kind you accept." He tightened the band. "My father built carriages. When he died, his debts passed to my mother. Then to me. Harrow purchased them. He offers work, then adds fees faster than wages can meet them. My sister signed as guarantor when she was 17. He owns that signature now." Evelyn thought of the way Elias controlled people without visible chains. Why work for the county? Because an inspector's record can stop a rich man for a day. Sometimes a day is enough for someone poorer to survive. And sometimes the inspector owes the rich man money. Jonas met her eyes. Yes, it was not a confession, but it was the shadow of one. Evelyn understood that he had warned her without yet choosing a side. She should have dismissed him. Instead, she handed him a second wrench. The pipe beneath the scullery leaks. They worked without speaking until the barrel held water. The next day brought the first women who remembered Hollowmere not as a ruin but as refuge. Margaret Brindle, the postmistress's aunt, arrived, wrapped in 2 shawls and carrying a wooden box. She had lived at the manor for 6 months after fleeing a husband who sold her sewing machine to pay gambling debts. Hollowmere trained her in postal accounts. Another woman, Beatrice Cross, had learned metal polishing in the old classroom and later married Graymere's blacksmith by her own choice. They brought no deed, but they brought objects stamped with the lantern, a wage book, a brass meal token, a certificate of instruction signed by Lydia Hart. Beatrice placed the certificate on the nursery table. "Your mother never gave charity that made a woman smaller," she said. "She gave work, a room, and the time to decide what came next." "Why did no one challenge Elias when the house closed?" Evelyn asked. Margaret looked toward Ruth. "Some did. Letters vanished. A solicitor lost his practice. One witness was charged with theft. Another had her children threatened. We were safe only because we scattered. Then he won. For 18 years, Beatrice said. Not forever. Their testimony transformed the Manor's silence. Every room acquired a remembered purpose. The east parlor had been a sewing workshop. The music room held evening lessons and reading. The servants' hall became a dining room where everyone, including Lydia, ate at the same table. The sealed nursery sheltered children whose mothers needed time to work or recover. Evelyn walked through the house hearing voices where she had heard only damp and settling beams. She also learned that the bell code was not merely for servants. 1 ring meant ordinary assistance. 2 meant a private meeting. 3 meant danger. Combinations directed residents toward hidden exits. The sequence under the nursery drawer was an evacuation route. Lydia had turned a Manor's machinery of hierarchy into a system of protection. That evening, Evelyn and Jonas followed the code through the west passage and found a concealed staircase descending below the old laundry. At the bottom stood an iron door with a lantern-shaped opening. Evelyn's locket fitted the shape but did not turn. Behind the door, something metallic shifted when they pushed. A strong room, Jonas said. Or a trap. The hinge pins were inside. Beyond reach. A narrow slot in the wall accepted the brass token marked 42. But nothing happened. On the stone beside it, almost erased by lime, were the words, "The house opens only, when every room answers." They returned to the bellboard. 17 bells. 17 witness names. 1 mechanism, to open the strong room. Every bell likely had to be pulled in the correct order. The order was missing. Ruth remembered Lydia walking from room to room on the night before the fire, testing each bell while Samuel stood in the hall writing numbers. Somewhere in Hollowmere was that sequence. The discovery gave them hope and gave Elias a clearer target. Before dawn, men entered through the ruined boathouse. They did not set fire. They searched. Drawers were overturned. Wall panels pried loose. And the nursery cradle smashed against the hearth. Evelyn woke to the sound of wood breaking and rang 3 bells. Ruth opened the hidden exit. Jonas came through the kitchen passage with Abel and the vicar behind him, all carrying lanterns. The intruders fled toward the lake, leaving muddy prints and a dropped iron bar stamped H. D. R. Harrow Development and Rail. Evelyn stood over the broken cradle. The empty groove beneath its runner was exposed. Her mother's hiding place had been discovered, though not yet opened. He knows about the seal, Ruth said. He knows there is something in the cradle. Evelyn answered. Not what? Among the splinters, Jonas found a scrap of paper that had been wedged inside the cradle's headboard. It contained only 4 words in Samuel's hand, begin where Lydia sang. Ruth remembered a lullaby Lydia used while walking Evelyn through the house. It named rooms in an odd-order kitchen fire. Library rain. Nursery moon. Garden bell. Chapel dawn. What sounded like poetry was a root. They tested the corresponding bells. 5 counterweights moved. But the strong room door remained closed. The lullaby had more verses. No one remembered them all. Mrs. Brindle searched the undelivered letters and found one woman quoting a line, "When the east room darkens." Let the schoolroom answer. Beatrice recalled another. By gathering fragments from women scattered across the county, they began rebuilding a song Lydia had deliberately shared, so no single person carried the whole code. Evelyn saw the design clearly now. Her mother had expected documents to be burned, witnesses threatened, and rooms searched. She made memory itself the lock. Harrow could seize a ledger, but not a lullaby divided among 17 women. By the 3rd night, they had 12 lines. 5 remained missing. Snow began over the lake. The auction notice gave them 4 days. Elias sent no more warnings. His silence was worse. It meant he believed someone inside Hollowmere would finish the work for him. Evelyn looked at Jonas across the bellboard and remembered his debts, his sister's signature, and the warning he had almost confessed. She wanted to trust the hours they had worked side by side. She also knew wanting was not evidence. When Harrow calls in your sister's debt, she asked, "What will you give him?" Jonas did not answer soon enough. "I do not know," he said at last. "Then decide before he asks." Evelyn replied, "Because this house has survived men who waited until the price of courage was named." Over the next 3 days, Hollowmere became both workshop and fortress. Jonas inspected every beam that might delay demolition and drafted an objection to the county office. Ruth decoded the servant bells. Mrs. Brindle searched old postal registers. Evelyn cleaned the former classroom and found 17 shallow drawers beneath the benches, each marked with the lantern symbol. 16 were empty. The 17th contained a brass token stamped with the number 42 and the words Grayshire Deeds. Book 9. It looked like a reference to a registry, but the county records office claimed Book 9 had been damaged by flooding years earlier. "Then the token is useless," Jonas said, "or it points to something removed before the flood." Evelyn replied. The nursery markings gave another code. Each height line had a small number beside it, almost hidden under old pencil flourishes. When arranged by date, they produced 421312. Bell rooms, library, east bedchamber, nursery, kitchen, nursery, library. Evelyn pulled each corresponding bell in sequence. Somewhere behind the walls, counterweights shifted. A panel opened beneath the nursery window, revealing a narrow tin compartment. Inside lay a child's shoe, a photograph of Lydia holding a 3-year-old Evelyn, and a letter from Samuel Hart. "My dearest girl," it began. "If you are old enough to read this, I have failed to return. I signed Harrow's dissolution because he promised your mother would be released. She was already beyond his promise. I spent 4 years proving the trust survived and that Hollowmere passes through Lydia's line to you. The proof is divided because one paper can burn. The registry number is with the children. The witness names are with the bells. The original seal is where Lydia carried you to sleep. Do not trust a man merely because he regrets betraying you. Regret is not repair." Evelyn finished the letter with tears she refused to wipe away. Her father had not been innocent. He had been afraid, weak, and late. Yet he had spent his remaining years trying to repair what fear made him do. That truth hurt more than a simple hero or villain would have. It also gave her direction. The original seal was where Lydia carried her to sleep. The cradle. They dismantled it carefully. No seal appeared. Beneath one runner, they found only an empty groove shaped like Evelyn's locket. She placed the locket inside. The runner released a spring and opened. But the cavity held no deed. Only a rolled strip of linen embroidered with 19 women's names. The last was Evelyn Hart. Beside it were the words beneficiary and keeper. "This proves intention," Jonas said, "not title. Harrow knows the difference." Evelyn replied. That evening, Jonas received a note at the village inn. He did not show it to Evelyn. The next morning, he worked silently, avoiding her eyes. At noon, he said he needed to carry the inspection objection to the county office personally. He took the path across the moor. By dusk, he had not returned. Ruth checked the classroom. The torn ledger page was gone. So were Samuel's letter, the brass registry token, and 3 of the old envelopes. He took them, Ruth said. Evelyn searched the nursery in disbelief, though she already knew. Jonas's identification disc still lay in her pocket. He had left the proof of his name and stolen the proof of hers. Outside, wheels rattled on the drive. Elias's carriage stopped at the gate. He did not enter. Caleb climbed down, nailed a notice over the first, and left. Demolition and public auction. 48 hours. Eunice sold us. Ruth said. Evelyn looked at the notice until the letters steadied. Samuel's warning returned. Do not trust a man merely because he regrets betraying you. Regret is not repair. Then we continue without him. They searched through the night. Mrs. Brindle brought parish ledgers. The vicar brought burial records and confessed that his predecessor had accepted donations from Harrow while altering entries. A blacksmith named Abel Cross removed 3 corroded bell casings so Evelyn could inspect their interiors. Each bell had a maker's stamp, but no names. Near dawn, Ruth collapsed in the corridor, exhausted and feverish. Evelyn settled her in the safe room and sat beside her until she slept. For the first time since arriving, despair entered, not as grief, but as calculation. 48 hours. No original deed. No trustworthy inspector. Elias held the stolen papers. The county office was a day's journey away. Hollowmere's roof could not survive a large crowd, much less demolition tools. Evelyn considered taking Ruth and leaving. The house had already given her the truth of her childhood. Perhaps truth was all it could give. Then the North Nursery bell rang. 1 note. A pause. 2. Evelyn stood. Ruth was asleep. No one else was near the bellboard. The bell rang again. Not from a pulled wire, but from wind pressing through the open service door below. The movement shook loose, a flake of black paint from the wooden label. Under North, Nursery was an older name engraved directly into brass Lydia's room. Evelyn touched the plate. The witness names are with the bells. Not inside the bells. With them. She unscrewed the brass label and found writing on its reverse. Ada Vance. Ruth Vale. Margaret Brindley. Beatrice Cross. 4 witnesses. Every bell plate carried names. 17 bells. 17 women. Together they formed a witness list to the trust transfer. Still, witnesses without the sealed instrument might not stop Harrow. The original seal is where Lydia carried you to sleep, not the cradle. Evelyn realized. Her mother had carried her through the house when she would not sleep. Ruth, awake now, remembered Lydia walking the galleries at night, always circling beneath the great central bell suspended in the glass dome above the entrance hall. The house bell had not rung in 18 years. It hung 2 stories above them, large enough to call workers from the fields. Its rope had been cut after the fire. Abel climbed into the roof while Evelyn and Mrs. Brindle steadied the ladder. He lowered the bell inch by inch using block and tackle. Dust cascaded from the dome. When the bell reached the hall floor, they turned it carefully. The outer surface bore only the maker's name. The inner rim, black with age, carried a line of tiny engraved words. Female settlement of Hollowmere. Executed 14, May 1848. Graysire Deeds Book 9, Folio 42. Continuing in the lawful female line of Lydia Hart. Witnessed under seal. Beneath it were the same 17 names hidden behind the room labels. At the center of the bell's crown was a recessed hollow shaped like the locket. Evelyn pressed her mother's locket into it. A cap released. Inside lay a red wax seal, wrapped in oilskin, and a narrow copper plate bearing the full legal abstract. Samuel Hart's correction. And the stamp of the county registrar. The original parchment was elsewhere, but the copper abstract had been created as a certified duplicate. It might be enough. Why hide it in a bell, Mrs. Brindle asked. Ruth smiled weakly. Because Harrow never listened when women called. The auction began the next morning under a sky heavy with snow. Elias arrived with buyers. A county constable. Mr. Peak. Laborers. And a steam winch for pulling down the east chimney. Jonas came in the last carriage. He stepped down beside Caleb. pale and hollow-eyed, carrying a leather case. Evelyn watched him without speaking. Villagers gathered beyond the gate. Elias stood on the front steps and announced that Hollowmere and its surrounding land would be sold as cleared development property once demolition began. Mr. Pike opened the bidding ledger. Evelyn walked out carrying the copper plate. The sale is unlawful. Elias did not look surprised. Miss Hart is distressed by the loss of temporary lodging. Hollowmere belongs to the female settlement established in 1848 and passes through Lydia Hart to her lawful daughter. She read the registry reference aloud. Mr. Pike's pen stopped. The county constable stepped closer. Elias laughed. An engraving on household metal is not a deed. No, Evelyn said, but a certified copper abstract bearing the registrar's stamp is admissible evidence of one. She held it up. Mr. Pike went gray. Where did you find that? Elias asked. Where my mother carried me when I could not sleep. His gaze moved toward the bell, visible through the open doors. For 1 second, his face showed fear. Then Caleb shouted that smoke was coming from the east wing. Flames burst behind an upper window. The crowd scattered. Elias had prepared for failure. While everyone watched the steps, lamp oil had been poured through the old ventilation shafts. Fire raced along dry paneling toward the library and nursery. Ruth was inside, collecting the bell plates. So were Mrs. Brindle and 2 village women who had helped move the records. Evelyn ran into the hall. Jonas seized her arm. The east stair is blocked. She pulled free, then opened the service passage. Caleb locked it. You know where the second entrance is. His face broke. Evelyn, I am sorry. Regret is not repair. She repeated her father's words. Repair it. Jonas took a crowbar and ran toward the kitchen. Evelyn climbed the main stairs through smoke. Above her, plaster cracked and fell. She reached the north corridor as flames rolled from the east gallery. Ruth called from behind the library panel. The hidden door had jammed. Evelyn wrapped her sleeve around her hand and pulled. It would not move. Smoke thickened. Behind the wall, someone coughed. The copper plate remained in Evelyn's hand. She could retreat with the evidence and secure Hollowmere, or she could use the plate's edge to pry the latch, likely bending or destroying the one document capable of stopping Elias. The choice lasted less than a breath. She drove the copper under the warped panel and levered. The plate folded. The latch tore free. Ruth and the others stumbled out. The proof. Ruth gasped when she saw the bent copper. People first, Evelyn said. The main stair was burning. They moved through the nursery and down the cradle shaft one by one. Evelyn descended last. Halfway down, the roof above the east wing collapsed with a roar. Heat rushed through the passage. Jonas had opened the kitchen exit and waited in the rain. Bleeding from one temple, he carried Mrs. Brindle clear, then returned for Ruth. Outside, snow mixed with ash. Villagers formed a line from the lake, passing buckets. Elias stood beyond them, shouting that the structure was lost and should be allowed to burn. The county constable watched him too closely. Caleb tried to reach the carriage. Abel Cross and 2 quarrymen blocked his path. Then Jonas opened the leather case he had brought. Inside were Samuel's letter, the registry token, the ledger page, and a packet of Harrow development accounts. He ordered me to steal the papers. Jonas said before everyone, he holds my sister's debt and threatened to send her to prison over a signature he forged. I took the records. Then I searched his office. These accounts show trust money transferred into Harrow companies for 18 years. They also show payment to Caleb Sorn for fires at Hollowmere, including last night and today. Elias moved toward him. The constable stepped between them. You expect anyone to believe a thief, Elias said. No, Jonas answered. That is why I brought Mr. Pike's copies. Mr. Pike closed his eyes. When he opened them, Whatever loyalty he had possessed was gone. "The signatures are genuine," he said. "I prepared several transfers." "Mr. Harrow told me the settlement had dissolved. When I questioned the absence of the original deed, he instructed me to proceed under indemnity." "Coward," Elias whispered. "Mr. Pike looked at Evelyn. Yes, the admission did not absolve him, but it completed the chain. "Mrs. Brindle produced the bell plates. Ruth named the surviving witnesses. The vicar brought the altered burial register showing Lydia Hart recorded dead in London before she had actually left Graymere. Most important, the county constable revealed that a clerk had arrived from the Graysire Records office that morning in response to Jonas's earlier inspection objection. Book 9 had not been destroyed in the flood. It had been transferred to a dry archive and misindexed under the lantern symbol. Folio 42 remained intact. A certified copy of the Hollowmere settlement was in the clerk's satchel at the village inn. The bent copper plate had not been the only proof. It had been the map to proof no one knew still existed. Elias Harrow was taken into custody before the last flames were extinguished. Caleb followed. Mr. Pike surrendered his papers and later testified in return for consideration the court might or might not grant. Jonas did not ask Evelyn to forgive him. He gave his statement, returned every document, and offered himself to the constable for theft. Evelyn said nothing on his behalf that day. Regret was not repair. Repair would take time. Hollowmere lost the east roof, 2 bedrooms, and most of the old library. The nursery survived, though the blue birds on the wallpaper were darkened by smoke. The great bell lay on the hall floor, cracked along one side where falling timber struck it. The demolition order was suspended, then voided. The auction buyers disappeared. Harrow Development entered receivership when the trust's recovered claims were filed. Money stolen over 18 years could not all be returned, but enough remained in property and accounts to stabilize the manor and restore the original fund. Evelyn became legal keeper of Hollowmere, not absolute owner. The settlement required that the house serve the purpose for which it had been created. For the first time, she understood why Samuel's letter called her beneficiary and keeper. The inheritance was not a private fortune. It was a duty with rooms. Winter settled over Graymere. Evelyn lived in the western rooms, while masons repaired the burned wing. Ruth moved into the old housekeeper's chamber and complained daily that everyone treated her as fragile. Mrs. Brindle organized the records with labels so severe even dust appeared obedient. The first resident arrived in January. A seamstress named Clara Wynne, whose employer had withheld 6 months' wages and dismissed her after she demanded payment. Hollowmere gave her a room, legal help, and a place at the work table. A second woman arrived 2 weeks later with bookkeeping skills and nowhere safe to use them. By spring, the former classroom held 8 desks. The walled garden produced onions, beans, and more potatoes than Ruth believed any civilized household required. The village no longer called Hollowmere condemned. They called it the Lantern House. Jonas spent 3 months working under the county mason without wages beyond food, repairing damage caused by the fire and by his betrayal. He did not enter the nursery unless Evelyn asked. He did not explain himself again. One evening in May, he brought her the restored copper plate, flattened and mounted between 2 panes of glass. The bend remained visible through the words. "I could not remove the mark without thinning the metal," he said. "Leave it," Evelyn replied. "It proves what it was used for." He nodded. "And what was saved instead?" She hung the plate in the entrance hall beside the cracked bell. Under it, she placed no portrait of Elias, no account of his arrest, and no list of the property recovered. She placed the names of the 17 women who had witnessed the settlement, Lydia Hart among them, and beneath those names, the names of every woman who entered Hollowmere afterward. Evelyn added her own last, not as owner, but as keeper. On the first anniversary of her arrival, She climbed to the nursery and stood beside the wall where her childhood height remained marked in pencil. The warning from her mother was still visible beneath the loosened paper. If Elias learns you opened this room, he will burn the house with you inside. Evelyn touched the words gently. Elias had learned. He had burned the house. But her mother had prepared not merely a hiding place for a deed. She had prepared a network of witnesses, bells, names, and women who remembered one another when official records failed. Hollowmere had not survived because its stone was stronger than fire. It survived because its truth had been divided among people. No single man thought important enough to fear. From below came the sound of the repaired servant bell. One note, then two. The old signal for the nursery. Evelyn followed it downstairs and found a frightened young woman at the front door, holding a carpet bag with both hands. A carriage was already turning away down the drive. The woman looked at the cracked walls, the new roof slates, and the lantern burning above the entrance. They told me this house takes in women who have nowhere to go, she said. Evelyn opened the door wider. Someone lives here now, she answered. Come in. Years later, people would tell the story incorrectly. They would say a discarded orphan was sent to a ruined manor and found a fortune behind a sealed door. They would speak of hidden gold because gold was easier to understand than records, courage, and patient repair. There had been no chest of sovereigns waiting for Evelyn. No single paper had solved her life. She found a name written on a nursery wall, a frightened father's confession, an old woman's memory, a postmistress's letters, a carpenter's imperfect repentance, and a bell engraved by women who knew the law might forget them. From those scattered things she built proof. From proof she rebuilt a house. And from the house she created the refuge her guardian had tried to erase. Elias Harrow sent Evelyn to Hollowmere because he believed ruin was another form of silence. He was wrong. Ruins keep every blow in their walls. Bells remember every hand that pulled them. And a house built to shelter the unwanted can wait a very long time for the rightful keeper to come home. If Evelyn's journey stayed with you, tell us where you are listening from and whether you believe Jonas earned a place at Hollowmere after what he did. Subscribe to Ruined Legacy Stories, where forgotten houses hold the names, promises, and truths powerful families tried to bury. Another locked room is waiting, and this time the key has already been found.